Good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Oh, come on. You had my main man, Dave, man. He's like rocking it. How you doing? Great. All right. So last year we did this panel, and we closed actually with finding something personal about each one. So we're going to start that way in reverse this time. So since we're all looking for mentors, I want to know who your mentor is and what do you learn from them? Michelle?
Oh, goodness. I feel like I have a lot of different mentors that I tap into. Some of them on the business side of the organization, some within marketing. Some have led me in various roles that I've had in the past, and have just helped me guide my journey. So yeah, it's wonderful just to tap into a variety of different types of mentors.
Great.
I would say that my mentors I've actually helped cultivate through a program that we launched called the Women's Innovators Network. And I do get mentored by men and women, but in this, it's actually men and women in there. And we've actually built a whole program around that. And so we use that as a consistent program to engage with other executive leaders. And it's a nice community. So I use that. And then I would say, Eric Barrage, who's the CEO of Blue Wolf, him and I, been partnered together for 13 years, and he's been a great, mentor for me.
Jerry Elliott is probably the one that I would call out. She's now the head of sales and marketing at Cisco. I used to work for her when I was at Juniper Networks. She's a combination of just personality, high standards, extremely driven, at the same time caring about people, and something that I've always tried to emulate in my career. So if you get a chance to work for Jerry, please do.
So just curious, show of hands, who here has a mentor? A lot. And who here is a mentor? Incredible experience. So there's a lot of talk at this conference this year about customer experience, customer centricity. Dave gave some great examples of Netflix and Amazon. They built these systems from the ground up around their customer. For a lot of us that are in B2B, it's not always so easy. We start off around our products or services, and then we're trying to kind of retrofit. So I'm just curious, in your world, what does that mean for you? How are you guiding this transformation to customer centricity?
Sure. So I'm not CMO of PwC. I lead marketing for the New Ventures organization within PwC, where we are standing up as many as 10 SaaS companies. So what that means for us is I have to think about the customer experience for essentially 10 brand new organizations in a large organization that has been very much relationship based and not necessarily built the technology ecosystem for the B2B transaction. So how do we build out the infrastructure and the systems to manage high velocity SaaS solutions and that relationship in a more digitized way is something that I'm building essentially from the ground up.
I kind of wear two hats. So as Blue Wolf, we are an agency and also part of IBM, which is a very large organization. And so, I kind of wear two hats, and I'm very client-facing. And so inside of Blue Wolf, we were born in the cloud, born in that era, and being in a services business. So, we've been going through that journey from day one, and it's always a consistent journey. But I think inside of large organizations, and I think for folks who are going through that in a large organization, I think the biggest thing is around building the belief system. And I always talk about, because we're doing this with clients inside of our organization, it's hearts and minds. And ultimately, to really drive the customer experience mindset, you really have to, it can't be a department-led initiative. We really look at it as executive level leadership. And I think we could probably dive more into that. But that is kind of where we focus and where we go into accounts and we talk with clients, that's where we focus.
So just before my company got acquired by 8x8, that's how I ended up 8x8, we went through a rebranding exercise and we called our platform X Series. And one of the lines that we used to use is that X is experience and experience is everything. But you come to our website and the experience really sucks, right? I mean, it's really bad. And I own it, so I can say it. And we make everybody go through how we've been doing business for the past N number of years. You have to fill out a form, somebody will call you, you cannot transact on the web, somebody necessarily needs to call you. So one of the big things that we're doing and all the changes that we're doing is anchored in this piece that we're looking at, which is if you say experience is everything, we need to provide an experience the way the prospect or the customer wants to deal with you. Some cases they want to search, some cases they want to get a phone call, some cases they want to do an email, whatever, right? So we want to be able to create that kind of seamless experience which can allow you to deliver that kind of service on the web. And funnily enough, we sell a bunch of products ourselves which allows our customers to do that, and we just haven't done it internally, and that's what we're looking to do now. Yeah.
Drink more of your champagne?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. So you mentioned leadership. Who does own the customer experience for your company?
Well, there's two sides. I would say inside of Blue Wolf, absolutely the CEO and the CMO, and I would say even more our CTO. We don't really have a traditional CIO. We really see that as the trifecta. You know, if you have to have those three engaged. Inside of IBM, it's the same. Michelle Peluso, Ginny Rometty. I mean, a lot of the executive leadership are focused on understanding that it's not about being a product company, you know, a company that's 105 years old and going through a lot of change over time. You know, it's a consistent looking at yourself, because over generations and decades, your company is changing. And so it is a very much an executive level driven program.
Michelle?
Well, given that we are a partnership and we have been over 160 years of really relationships, it's a very personal relationship between the partner and the customer. I think what is important, and it comes down to really the education that you were talking about customer experience and what that means in a digital era, is how can we bring that into a high velocity SaaS sale where we're still meeting those high expectations. And we do that through storytelling to help our internal organization understand why it's important and how we're going to need to change in order to get there.
So for us, it's no one person owns it. To the extent anybody owns it, it's the CEO, and to some extent me and as the demand gen person and the support side. But this is one of the issues that I think that I think Dave was trying to highlight, which is there is no one neck to choke for the CEO when it comes to customer experience overall, not just from prospecting all the way down to renewals and cross-sell and upsell and so on. So we do need to have one, we don't.
So I think there's something to be said then for everyone in some way, shape, or form owning the customer experience. So as you go through this change, what are your key metrics? So you start somewhere, or wherever that might be, and then you're moving forward. What are some of the key KPIs you put in place at your company to determine if you're becoming more customer-centric?
Well, I'm starting at ground zero. A lot of these solutions that I'm taking to market haven't even launched yet. So I'm literally, at this point in time, just, do I have a system or do I not? So checking that box is very binary, and moving on to how those are getting stood up so that we can build our ecosystem. So out of the gate, they will be very much the basic metrics until we can graduate into more sophisticated systems of measure.
A few ways. Biggest one for us, because we're in the services business, is repeat clients and referral. And referral is always a challenge to always totally track, but repeat business is a big metric for us. Another area is just looking at some of the leading metrics. So are we making it easier for our prospects, our clients to engage with us? Time spent on content, are they enjoying what we're providing to them? Little things like that, but I think the biggest metric is client NPS, retention, and referral.
So for us, it's NPS, retention, and expansion for the same accounts. So 8x8 is unified communications in the cloud provider, voice, video, chat, and contact center in the cloud. And our industry is known for doing really, really bad at NPS. Every provider in this space, they have negative NPS. And so focusing on NPS and trying to expand to make that better is one of the big initiatives. And funnily enough, until about a year ago, 8x8 as a company was focused more on the bottom line, not on growth. And so we really didn't spend a lot of time thinking about either acquiring customers or even trying to expand the existing ones in NPS and so on. So those are the things, like NPS and the stuff that we're doing on the top of the funnel, those are the big changes that we've brought in, but NPS is the single biggest metric that we're looking to change.
It's been a popular metric for a long time.
Just to add on to that, I think it's not necessarily even around looking at customer experience in a silo and the metrics, but realizing that every organization right now is competing for mind share and is being disrupted. And if that is happening, over 65% of CEOs are saying, how am I going to compete? I'm going to compete on the experience. And so it's more than just, yes, what we just said, but I think if we look at every industry, every company is dealing at that highest level of disruption and change, and we know businesses need to reinvent themselves, and customer experience is where people are starting. But it's not the only destination.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, audience-wise, it's one of those games where you keep your hands up. How many of you have 20% or more of your revenue comes from existing customers? 30%. 40, 50, 60, 70. I caught a few with that one. 80.
Wow.
Ooh, we got to still have hands up. 90. Wow. Go Cvent. All right. 100%. Okay. So there's a lot of people in this room that have a lot of revenue coming from existing customers. So I think this whole adage about focusing on the customer experience is really critically important that we measure it. So there's a lot of technology here too. We're in an age of digital transformation, a lot to figure out. So digital transformation can mean a lot of things. We all look at that MarTech, what is it, 8,000 now, 8,500, 9,000. But how are you guys approaching digital transformation in your business? What's your framework that you're taking? How do you decide what you should be investing in, what you should de-invest in?
It's a really interesting challenge. As I've been in the role just over 3 months now, and across the firm, there is a consolidation and a sort of a standardization of the marketing technology stack, across the organization at large. Whereas my small team has a completely different business model. So I'm kind of fighting upstream for some of these resources and trying to explain how our business is different, the different ways that we need to set up our stack for success, and try and get on the radar for different resources that are, really servicing, well, I could probably say 98% of the business, where the current revenue is coming from. But we've been deemed an innovation part of the company's future. So how do you sort of break through that noise and fight for the solutions that you really need? And again, it comes through really just demonstrating how, why, bringing in experts that can help us really explain why those stories are compelling, so we can make that business case and stand up the technology stack that we need in order to be successful.
I'm going to give a big answer here, because I think my feeling is that digital transformation has always been, it's not the destination. And we're actually in a complete infancy of what that word means. Because when we think about it, we're thinking about it maybe MarTech and our CRM. But the reality is digital transformation is just one step into a journey that is we're all going to be going through as AI becomes a bigger part. And really what we look at more holistically is this is more about the further destination of us becoming what we call a cognitive enterprise. And so digital is the foundation. You have to be digital to unlock that in your business. And so we're only at the beginning steps of that process, and how you actually can begin to unlock the data and the processes in your business to really prove a whole nother decade of what our businesses are going to be. And I think we are very focused on our customers, which is where we should be, but I think the next journey of where we're going with this is around the employee experience, and how all of you in this room can have an experience that is so simple, like your consumers and your customers. And so I think we're at the infancy. We're beginning to now get into the employee experience equals customer experience, and that's kind of where we are in our journey, is really focusing on that employee experience.
So before answering your question, let me go off on a rant first. So that whole chart that was made by LumaScape or Brinker is a complete idiotic concept. And it's not as if, if someone got the idea 7, 8 years ago, MarTech was new, I can put this stuff in. And by the way, I'm ranting because before I came to 8x8, I ran a MarTech company. We were AI for marketing for B2B. We used it for targeting people on Facebook, Twitter, and Google, and so on and so forth. And so everybody would ask this question. You're one of the 8,000 logos in there. But then it's completely idiotic. I'm not, as a purchaser of MarTech, I don't look at 8,000 of these. It's not, you can't put Slack on one side and PowerPoint on another, put a logo for those two, and claim that this is something that marketers such as ourselves need to make a decision on. It's completely idiotic. But anyway, so having said that, in terms of, now that I'm on the other side, now that I'm not on the vendor side, I do have a better sense of what is it that I should have been selling back then. And it also, and because of that, I have a good sense of what's going on in the marketplace in terms of MarTech and so on. So the guiding principle of all the different things that we're doing is experience is everything, and how do we create a better experience. And within my world, the 3 major areas that we're looking at are how do we fix the inbound marketing, which is practically all of the stuff that we bring in today. Marketing for 8x8 is super critical. Almost all revenues that we generate internally comes from marketing. And that's all primarily inbound. So we're adding an outbound layer to this, and we're also trying to figure out how to optimize the conversion, right? So how do I send the leads quick enough? Because we sell to 0 and 1 employee companies all the way to 10, 20, 30,000 employee companies, and everybody in between. So for the small end, how do I route it appropriately, route it quickly? On the higher end, it's more around nurture and doing a more typical B2B kind of style.
You should have heard him during the dry run. He was even more animated. Now, a real good point, because there's more and more to choose from. So I'm just curious, from a business framework, how do you rationalize this internally, regardless of what the business driver is? What are you looking at? What criteria do you use, your buying center, as you're trying to think about, okay, now we are ready for this particular category, no, we're not ready. How do you make that decision?
Well, I've been, I guess, fortunate in my career to have done this on a much larger scale with, quite honestly, some pretty tight constraints. I built the full digital strategy, including the data mapping, for an SEC and GDPR compliant wealth management company several years ago with a really significant budget. And then I've also worked at pre-seed startups where I've got, essentially your own wit, right? In terms of that's your marketing budget. So putting those two things together, for me, it's how do we build a solid foundation upon which we can have success and not overbuild for the future? When you're balancing from a startup perspective, there's a desire to, I need one of those, I need one of those. It becomes a shopping list. And you just have to start with the basics. Get that down pat, and then start to figure out where your team can grow into, and then test and iterate. But don't overcomplicate and don't overbuy.
I would say it really depends on where you are in your journey. I always say start with where the revenue is and work your way backwards. Start following it all the way back, not from marketing all the way there. If you're in an organization where you have to align a lot of different departments and budgets, I always look at what's going on in the CIO's office. If they're leading part of this, find out where their priorities are. How do you sit in there? Because you got to sell how it sits into their existing roadmap and which features are coming live at what point. So that's maybe one strategy. I would say it really is about having a constant diligence about looking at solutions as they're coming in, understanding your roadmap. And I think the biggest thing at the end of the day is, and we're big believers, we've been doing this for a long time, is it's just, technology is just tools. Your people have to be taught sometimes about actually how to rethink how to do marketing with these tools. You actually can't take that for granted. You just put it in there and they're going to figure it out and learn new marketing techniques. So you've got to spend just as much time engaging those hearts and minds of your employees and training everybody. Okay, how are we going to actually put this in our workflow? How does that going to fit in our workflow in our business? And so I think there's a bunch of different techniques out there, but those are just a few.
So we are measured, at 8x8, we are measured only on pipeline. So MQL doesn't matter, pipeline, and occasionally on revenue if sales misses the numbers. And so any changes, any changes that, by the way, blaming marketing happens everywhere. I've worked a long time in my life. It happens everywhere. We just live with it. Even the only difference here at 8x8 is that we count for revenue far greater than anywhere else I've seen. So if I catch a cold, Sam Wilson, the SB sales guy, he catches pneumonia, right? So it is what it is. So, but then, so in terms of trying to figure out how to do it and rationalize, as long as I can make a case that this is going to increase pipeline, it's going to work, right? And our industry, our vertical that we're in, it's going like gangbusters. I mean, everybody thinks VoIP is, old tech and so on and so forth. But in reality, the market, I mean, it's depending on whom you believe, the market is anywhere from $6 to $20 billion large and growing at 35% year over year, right? There's not a whole lot of markets out there where that happens. And so right now, this is just purely a land grab. I know Fuse is here and maybe RingCentral, all of us are fighting for the same thing right now. And so, so anything that we can do to, any tools, data, anything that can get us exposure to a bunch of things that we couldn't do, that's basically what we're looking at. And sales guys always keep complaining about, hey, Venkat, there is this 80% of the companies that are looking for VoIP are not even coming to our website, go fix it. So those kinds of things to say that, hey, I can get you this 80% of leads that you couldn't touch earlier, those are things that usually seal the deal for us.
So I'm just curious of the technology that you are investing in. What percentage are you using it towards the acquisition side of customers versus the expansion and retention side?
Well, I'll keep my answer brief. So it's all acquisition. As soon as I get those first customers, that next day, it'll be how do I make sure that I keep them? But until that milestone has happened, that's where I'm focused.
Yeah, I would say mine is probably more on the retention and expansion. We were talking about this earlier. We are an ABM. We've always been ABM. That's just the nature of services, right? And so I would say it's probably more there versus acquisition, but we do use it there.
Okay.
For us, I would say the same data and our tools that we're using for acquisition, a lot of that is used for retention as well. So another detail about our business, VoIP service, the biggest competitor, we lose to companies dying. We very rarely lose customers because it's extremely sticky. Nobody wants to report the phone system, blah, blah, blah. And so, but there is a period of first 3-6 months where it's super important for us to understand what's going on, to be able to keep them as customers and further expansion. So some of the tools around intent data, Bombora, G2 Crowd, and so on and so forth, that we use for acquisition is also used for expansion and retention as well. But I have to be honest. I mean, given that I'm measured on pipeline, 90% of my attention goes to, notwithstanding comments that I made earlier, goes to acquisition and not the later stages.
Yeah, fair enough. So today we wear a lot of hats in marketing. Job gets harder all the time. One of the biggest hats we wear is that of change agent. So leading the charge, customer centricity, digital transformation, business strategy, branding is just as important as ever. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts about how you're driving change.
I think that's my job in this role for the firm, and how we think differently about how we can engage. I mean, one of the reasons that they decided to stand up this new division is really to diversify and disrupt themselves in terms of how can we think through different revenue streams and through recurring revenue instead of just rates and hours. And so everything that I do, I feel like I'm breaking glass to some degree, which is difficult to try and figure out when to push, when to pull back, when just to educate, especially when you've got really hard charging goals. If there are metrics, we need to stand these up, we need to get these products into market, I need to start bringing in revenue. And so in some cases, that process of educating and gaining the buy-in that you'd really like to have feels like a luxury. Of course it's not, you have to do it, but that you feel sort of the sand slipping through the hourglass in terms of the time that takes.
First of all, I'm so excited to be here with B2B marketers because I really believe that the CMO are going to be the next CEOs. I think we've already seen the CMO of McDonald's become CEO. We're going to start to see more of it because this role can be that change agent. Because you know about the customer, because you're becoming technology, you're driving technology in the business across the different centers. So I think to Dave's point earlier, I think it's an amazing time to be in marketing, and I think there are going to be lots more CMOs becoming CEOs.
Yeah.
Yes. So I want to go back to a point that Corinne made earlier. Yes, we are implementing a lot of technology and data, but the biggest change that we're bringing is around the process. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of high velocity, high volume business that we do, and if you don't nail the process, it's not going to work. And process has to do with people, process has to do with, well, just putting in the process. Technology can enable you, but it's primarily about the process. And the changes that a lot of change, we're using technology as a way to drive the process changes, but ultimately it's the process changes that are driving the scaling that we're seeing in marketing everywhere else and even in ABA.
So besides the process and the technology, it's also a lot about people, right? So I'm curious how you build your teams. What do you look for in today's hires, whether they're just coming out of college or they're experienced? Are there certain aspects, capabilities that are essential?
Yeah, curiosity, hunger to learn, quite honestly. I think those are the most important characteristics. Everything else will change, right? Our jobs will change, how we do things, the technology will change, but if you have that hunger and that desire to learn and to figure things out, that's the makings of a winning team.
It's a great question. It really depends on the role. I love asking for new hires, for junior hires, what was the first way you ever made money? And I look for people who are just creative, who are going to go in and jump in and figure it out. So one gentleman told me that he was a newspaper back in the day, right? That was his first job. But I would say it really depends. It's a full cultural approach. It is a cultural hire that I look for more than anything. I can teach anybody tools. I can teach anybody a process. I can't teach you to always have a voice and to break half of the things you probably learned in college. So, I think it's a cultural hire for me.
So there are 4 sets of things that I look for. Usually everything is 3s, but this time I had 4. So the first one is values, and that goes to what Michelle was talking about. Perseverance, willing to learn, those are the things that I primarily look for. Second, I look for raw aptitude. So if you look at my team, it's mostly composed of there is maybe 2 or 3 people who have a lot of experience, but a lot of people are way down, which is to say I need more people in the mid as well. But those kids are really smart kids, right? Not just values and learning and so on, but just really smart folks. The third thing I look for is skills for that particular job, and this is the order of priority. And finally, experience. Those are the things that I look for when I look to hire people.
Excellent. So we got about 5 minutes left. We started by asking about mentors. So in closing, I'd like you to be a little reflective on your own career. So if you were going to give advice to yourself, so knowing what you know now, and go back to the version of when you just get out of school, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, goodness.
Oh, wow.
I'll start.
Go ahead.
Right.
I'll give 2. Number 1, I would say have your children while you're young. I think for women in this field, obviously we're trying to drive diversity in our businesses, but I would say if you're a woman in your career, don't wait and put it off if that's what you want. I would say do it while you're young. That's what I would tell myself. The second one would be, you know, don't worry about, you know, you're going to second guess yourself, but keep going. I think you got to turn your brain off half the time. You know, your brain's going to tell you, you know, this isn't good enough or whatnot. And the last one I would say is, you know, just go big. Go big. Always think way big. You know, half the time we set ourselves the bar way too low. Think way big.
So I've done a bit of everything in my career, so there is no common thread to anything that I have done. But the two big things, like, so I was an engineer, then I was an engineer for 1 year, and then I started selling plastics for GE. And usually I throw in the graduate joke here, but I don't know how many would get that. Thank you. And so I sold plastics, and then as an engineer where you learn tips and tricks and whatnot, I thought there is a whole thing around business, and I felt like I needed to go to business school. So I ended up going to business school, then I worked at, in business school, I was a summer associate at McKinsey, and that's when I realized there is nothing here. And the biggest lesson from that whole thing is that, you know, just do it, right? I should have just, after leaving McKinsey, and after business school, I started a company, but I need to have spent those 2 years in business school trying to figure that out. I should have just done it. And right time to do anything is now. And we tell ourselves, you know, I'll do this after A, B, C, D. Never works. Right time to do anything is now.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess I would just tell myself that each experience lends a different lesson, quite honestly. So when I think about my career, it's been on B2B, it's been B2C, it's been in research, it's been in strategy, it's been in technology, very analytical into the analytics, and it all, now it's coming together, right? It all makes sense in hindsight, and each of those sort of steps on the ladder has brought a really unique perspective that has brought me where I am today. Yeah, so it's interesting how it all comes together in the end.
Awesome. All right, in closing, finish this sentence. A year from now, my team will.
Increase our growth rate to 35%.
Yeah, all right.
We have a big number this year, so we're going to exceed that number.
All right.
Have launched 10 new SaaS ventures successfully.
Wow, 10. We can get stock, right? That's good. That's good. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to give you a couple minutes because I believe the bar is open, but give it up for our awesome panel. Thank you, everybody.